Okay. Starting right with verse 35, that's where we left off last week. But some will say, how are the dead raised, and with what kind of body do they come? So, all right. So Paul is he's addressing some of their objections that the Corinthians had to this idea of resurrection. Because remember, these guys are fairly well Hellenized. They're Greek. They've got a Greek mindset, and so in the Greek mindset, the body is just a shell that somehow supports and surrounds the intellect. So that's a little bit different. Okay, so what Paul is saying here is, okay, you guys are saying, how are the dead raised, and what kind of body will they have? Will they have this body here on the left? The kind of a body, or are they going to have the other body on the right there, the body, with the that you would expect from a rotting corpse to come out? Their idea of a resurrection of a corpse was what was keeping them from believing in a resurrection as such. So he's shifting the argument now. He's coming against some of their ideas where they are against the resurrection. He's trying to address these ideas. So it mostly has to do with the reconstruction of the body out of the same physical elements that the molecules and the cells that made up the body. So obviously, when a body it dies, it's going to be impossible to bring back that body with all of those cells because they're gone. They after a person has been dead, for a while, the critters get them, the worms get them, whatever. And so Paul talks about this, and he says, for instance, the whole idea of okay, say somebody they died. They died at sea. Poor old sailor died at sea, and the sailors, slip him over the side. Well, a fish or a shrimp or crabs or lobsters or something is going to eat this body. And then the atoms and the molecules, the cells of that body are going to become part of that fish. Well, then a fisherman comes along and he catches the fish. Well, when that fisherman eats the fish, well, then those cells and so forth become part of the fisherman's body. Well, and the fisherman dies, and the undertaker buries him out in the ground. And then eventually, many years later, somebody doesn't know there's a body buried under there. But what he does, he goes and sows some wheat over the grave. Well, the fisherman's atoms and the molecules, they'll go into that wheat. And then maybe another person, a third person, then would come along and eat the wheat, and so on and so on. You get the picture. It goes on and on. So how would the first person's body ever come together again? I've heard people argue this point about how can, one reason, some people say, well, I would never want to be buried at sea because then what would happen to my body? Whereas if I'm in the ground, I know that the body would still be there. Now, have you anybody that's ever gone out and done archaeology, or for that matter, crime scenes or industrial accidents and so forth, that it doesn't take a whole lot of time for a body to completely decompose, and it's just left just bones are there. And so that's no guarantee that being buried in the ground, that's no guarantee that your body's going to be there together. Well, if God can take just some dirt, random dirt, and make Adam, he can certainly put stuff back together again and make us anew. And so that's what Paul was saying. He goes on to the next the next verse there, and he says, "Fool, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies. And as for what you sow, you are not sowing the body that will be, but a bare seed, maybe of wheat or something else." Okay, so what he's saying there, he appears in some ways. Now, some people disagreed with, some of the commentators disagreed with me, but to me, it seems like Paul is addressing like one person here that maybe is teaching this false doctrine that there can be no resurrection, or that there doesn't have to be a resurrection, and so forth. So I think he's maybe pointedly, and perhaps I'm wrong. I mean, it could be that he's talking to the congregation as a whole. It really doesn't matter, but he gets very, very forceful with them here and calls them a fool. And so the objection there is that they seem to, after the body decomposes, they say, well, you'd never reassemble it. They wanted to avoid the idea of thinking that the material body was, this is that Hellenistic viewpoint again, that for the Hellenists, the Greeks, that there was what we call dualism in the as a philosophy. And dualism, it was very, very common in the Greek mindset, Greek thought. And basically what that is, it says that the body, our corporal body, is just a husk of the real person that dwells in it. Our spirit is what's really important, and that the more that one can live outside the constraints of that body, just the better it is. Now, the biblical view, on the other hand, is quite different, that the body is essentially a good thing, and it's very, very much a part of the person. And some parts, some bodies are better or more attractive than others. Yeah, we get that. But the readers here that would be reading this letter from Paul, they would not have had a positive view of the human body, and therefore their idea of resurrecting this worthless physical fleshly body, it was just not that attractive to them. And the whole idea of resurrecting a corpse, because if you've ever been around dead bodies or dead animals, how quickly they decompose, and then to resurrect something like that, how could that possibly be? But Paul goes on now to show them that the resurrected believer, the resurrection of the believers, is not a resurrection of that old body, but a resurrection of a glorified body, a changed body. And so this idea of the resurrection, it's not for now, it is a future event, whether or not the person has already died, or that they would still be alive when the resurrection comes. It doesn't matter, but it's a future event. So the Corinthians, in their own mind, they kind of felt like that this gift of the Holy Spirit that they had, especially when they're speaking in tongues, this manifestation of tongues that we've talked about, that they had already entered into the spiritual heavenly existence that was to be. And that was it. They had reached the pinnacle. And so that's why they kind of, denied the idea of, okay, why would we even want a resurrected body? Because we have reached nirvana already. I don't think they called it nirvana, but they've reached the pinnacle of spirituality because they could speak in tongues. All right. So in their mind, that sounded very reasonable, but it is very foolish, and Paul rebuked them for it. Instead of the wise Corinthians that they thought themselves to be, Paul called them fools. And so he tells them that the body that's resurrected is not going to be the same type of body that died. Okay, it's going to be different, and so a new form of life springs forth from the death, and so it's just, yeah, it's still the body. And how does this stuff work? I don't know. The idea that, I know the Bible says that we'll know and we'll be known as we were, but how does that go? I don't know, because God can take a little seed and we can put it in the ground. And this is one of the things that I really am fascinated by. I never, ever, ever get tired of it, is putting seeds in the ground and then waiting the appropriate amount of time and putting water and fertilizer and everything around the soil, and watching that seed sprout up from the ground. I mean, it's to me, it's a spiritual experience for me. I never get tired of it. And in fact, next week I will be planting, not well, in seed beds, not out in my garden, because around here we could get a freeze, but I'm going to be planting things in seed beds, and that always excites me, because I'm out there every day and I'm counting the days down, because I know some things are going to take 4 days to sprout, and other things are going to take 10 days to sprout. And I mark it on a calendar so that I can go out there and check on them, make sure. Some of them have to have light to sprout. Others have to have darkness to sprout. Some have to have the proper amount of heat in the ground before they'll sprout. So it's all, it's just an amazing thing to watch how a seed dies and then something comes from that. And so Paul is trying to bring those same parallels here into his argument. And so he says, but God gives it a body just as he planned, and to each of the seeds a body of its own. Okay, that's that whole idea of they had basically excluded God from the equation. That is why why Paul called them foolish, because they were just thinking that that resurrection, it can't be, because they can't explain it. And Paul is saying, look, no, look at this seed. When you put it in the ground, then it sprouts into something that does not look like that seed. And just because you cannot explain how that happens, you should not disregard it. All flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one flesh of humans, another flesh of animals, another of birds, another of fish. There are also heavenly bodies and earthly bodies, but the glory of the heavenly is one thing, while the earthly is another. There is one glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, another glory of the stars. For one star differs from another star in glory. All right, so this passage begins and ends actually in stressing the differences between or within kinds of bodies. Okay, now the Bible commentator Wiersbe says that pet lovers take note. Paul did not teach that animals will be resurrected. He only used them as an example. Well, this guy clearly never saw the movie All Dogs Go to Heaven. But anyway, he's looking at animals here. The second and the fifth sentences there, verses that they talk about, within. They stress the differences within a genus, and contrasting those with the earthly with the heavenly. Now, we all know there's differences in animals between humans and regular some kinds of animals, and then birds and fish. We all have very different structure in our bodies, and even though if you get down to the cellular level, there's probably more there's probably more similarity than there is difference, because at the cellular level, it's still just plain biology. But here, this gets down into kind of a chiastic structure, where not all flesh is the same. In other words, the earthly bodies. Then you got B that says, he gives different examples of the flesh, people, animals, birds, and fish. Then he goes on to C, there are heavenly or earthly kinds of bodies. And then you start backtracking. C prime, the splendor of the heavenly bodies is one kind, and the splendor of the earthly bodies is another kind altogether. And B prime, the examples that he gives, is the splendor of the sun, the moon, the stars, and then A prime, not all stars, heavenly bodies, have the same splendor. And that, of course, is true. You look at the sun. Okay, that is a different kind of light altogether. And of course, now these people, they were not privy to the scientific advances that we have today, so they just could see the ball of fire up there in the sky, and that was the sun, and they had their own ideas of what caused that. They didn't know that it was a big old ball of hydrogen gas. Okay, and then the moon. Well, that was something different altogether, and it was a cooler light and so forth. And then you get up there and you see the stars. Well, they couldn't differentiate, or did not much differentiate between the planets and the stars. It was much later that those kinds of differences came out. But if you look at even in the stars, we have first magnitude stars, second magnitude stars, and then all the others. And then you have some planets that are much, much brighter. Jupiter, Venus, Mars. Sometimes all of these are brighter than regular stars, and so they all have their own specific, peculiar type of splendor, as it were. And so out here, sometimes when it's real clear, we love to go outside and look up in the sky, and we can see the Milky Way stretched across the sky from kind of from southwest to northeast where we live. And it's beautiful to behold. And tonight there's supposed to be a meteor shower, in fact, but I don't think we'll see it because we're all cloudy and overcast here. But all of those things were, they held a lot of glory, a lot of splendor that Paul is talking about here. And that even though that there's our differences, he then compares the heavenly bodies, the celestial bodies, with our own bodies, and that, because that's going to be important. A body, can be fleshly and still exist in a different form, in a different environment. For instance, the animals, with humans, okay, we cannot exist underwater. We don't have the capacity for breathing underwater, and we don't do very well with trying to fly. I mean, it's normally, when you try to fly, it's a one-way trip, and that sudden stop at the bottom could be a killer. And so each animal has its own environment in which it can thrive. The stars, the celestial beings, are created, and they're put in an environment where they can survive. So that's how our own bodies are. We are a fleshly body. All right. So going ahead with that. So also the resurrection of the dead, sown in corruption, raised in incorruptions, sown in dishonor, raised in glory, sown in weakness, raised up in power. All right. He's saying here that the human body goes into the ground, and it's perishable. When our bodies, when we die, when we take that last breath, the decomposition starts almost immediately. I mean, without oxygen, the blood quickly turns from that bright red to a very dark color, and it stops flowing, and there's distinct differences within in the bodies that you find a body that's a person that has died, and you can look at them and you can see where the blood has pooled in the lower areas, and TV never gets that right. They don't put makeup on people to show the bodies where the lower part of their body is a darker color, and where the upper part of their body takes that ashen look about them. And so that is part of the decomposition of the body as it and it's almost immediately. You can really tell the age, or when, or how long a person has been dead, by looking at the level and the speed of their decomposition, given the weather conditions, whether it's cold or whether it's hot, or whether those different kinds of things, because it's predictable. It is something that happens to all of us. Okay, human bodies go into that. Well, any kind of body is, when it dies, it decomposes, and with this, Paul is talking about like a seed. When a seed goes in the ground, then that plant emerges. So here he's talking about a body, a human body goes into the ground, it's dying. But then when it emerges, it doesn't look like that decomposed or decomposing body that was put into the ground. It comes out new. And that's what he's saying. It's raised in incorruption. That body that is raised up by necessity has had to have been changed from something that is prone to rottenness and just decay and ruin. It has to be changed into something that is not prone to corruption or decay, for it to be raised from the dead. So here he says it's sown in dishonor and raised in glory. Again, sown in weakness, but raised in power. All those the differences between the old body and then what the new body is. So Paul goes on and then says, sown in a natural body, raised in a spiritual body. If there's a natural body, there's also a spiritual body. Here again, he's going back to that idea of the in the Greek philosophy, that natural body, the psychikos, that is the your physical body, and then the compared that to the pneumatikos. And remember, we'd already we'd talked about the pneumatikos being a spiritual being, and where the people of Corinth considered themselves much more as a pneumatikos, a spiritual being, or people of spirit, as opposed to people of flesh. And so here he's saying, okay, look, the natural body, that is earthly, that is bound to earth, that's the area, that's the region where we all live, that's who we are. But then there is a spiritual body, and that will be raised up into that spiritual body. Now, right now, do we have both? Yeah, we've got mostly a physical body. Do we have a spiritual body within us? Yes. I think we could say that we have the nephesh, that's that animal spirit within us. When we got the neshama, which is what we consider like our soul, and then the ruach, which is God's spirit in us, and so yeah, we've got other things that are going on with us, but we're not fully there. We still have a corruptible body. The body that we have is one that if we die today, no matter how spiritual we are, no matter how much we speak in tongues or have the gifts of the Spirit or whatever these things are, if I die today, then in 3 days, okay, I'm starting to stink, as would anyone. And that's just the nature of life. So Paul is saying, um, that natural body will be raised into a fully spiritual body. And he's saying, and look, if there is a natural body, there is also going to be a spiritual body. So going on, let's see. So also it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living soul. The last man became a life-giving spirit. However, the spiritual is not first, but the natural, then the spiritual. Okay, the natural body, that is physical. We've talked about that. That is who we are. I mean, that's the flesh and blood that we see, the ones that, you stick me with a pin, I'm going to, feel that pain and turn around and poke you in the nose for sticking me with a pin because it hurts. That's a human being. That's what we are. And the life inside us that it's what we talked about is characterized as, okay, kind of our soul, the nephesh and the neshama. That part of it, when our body dies, well, that part of it kind of leaves. It leaves the body, but that's part of our spirit that's going to be renewed to us. But what he's saying here is that the resurrected body is a spiritual. It's a product of Yeshua, because he rose from the dead. Then we can rise from the dead. Yeshua is that second Adam. Whereas, all flesh came through Adam and Eve. Well, then the new life is going to come. The spiritual life is going to come through Yeshua. Adam's was a physical life. Yeshua is going to be will be it, and it is a spiritual life. And that spiritual life that is going to come when we're resurrected, then that's never going to die. And Paul, he called it spiritual because it's already ready for, like the birds can inhabit the air. Well, our spirit can inhabit that spirit life and that spirit realm rather than the physical realm. So that's, we're just, it's kind of hard to explain, and reading, going through Paul, it is kind of difficult to explain to anybody. But we have our physical life here, but eventually we will have that spiritual life, that full spiritual life, but we won't get it until there is a full resurrection. Okay, any comments or questions before I dig any deeper into this hole? Verse 47, the first man is of the earth, made of dust. The second man is from heaven. Like the one made of dust, so also are those made of dust. And like the heavenly, so also are those who are heavenly. And just as we have borne the image of the one who made from dust, so also shall we bear the image of the one from heaven. All right. Paul he's kind of restating things again. You know how he does that? He will say something and then he'll say it another couple of times in a slightly different fashion. That's what he's doing here. Talking about Adam was made out of the dust because he was to live on this planet. This planet was dust. Adam was made from the dust of this planet. So that's where he's going to live. Yeshua had a heavenly origin. Okay. He's always been. But it was not of this earth. He was heavenly. And so he's comparing, that first Adam, and then that was dust, with the second Adam, which is spiritual. And we have there's going to be a transition. And so that Adam was fit for an age where he lived in this earth. But then that spiritual realm through Yeshua is going to be for our bodies, our resurrected bodies then, which will be divorced from the constriction and the constraints of this earth, and will be living in more of a heavenly existence, especially when we're talking about the millennial reign and then beyond, once there's the new heaven and new earth. So, and Paul is not talking here about the difference between heaven and hell. He's just talking about the difference between earth and the afterlife. And so, and he's not considering hell and the judgment and all that at this point. He's just talking about the idea of, okay, we are physical, and then once we die and are resurrected, that it will be a spiritual existence. And the in Jewish thought, there the people who died at the end of the day, end of time, that everyone is going to be resurrected. All people will be resurrected. Some, and then all will be judged. The people who are judged to be righteous will go on, and they will live in the Olam Haba, the world to come. The ones who are not, the ones who are not worthy or not righteous, then they will be put into a different category. They will go into Sheol. Okay. He said that we bear the image of Adam, but in the next life, after the resurrection, we'll bear the image of Yeshua. Okay. All right. Now we're actually going through this faster than I thought we would tonight, but that's okay. I'll give you a break tonight, I guess. Now I say this, brothers and sisters, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, and what decays cannot inherit what does not decay. All right, these are two completely different realms. All right, it just stands to reason that if we are human beings, then our human body, flesh and blood of corruption, or that we can decay, we can't inhabit heavenly realms. They're incompatible. Like, I cannot live in the water. I cannot fly through the air. I can, and I can't live in outer space. My body is not built for that. But the spiritual body, then, in a resurrected body, will be able to live in the heavenly realms, and that's what Paul is talking about there. And says, but behold, I tell you a mystery, and this is, of course, a very famous passage here. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last shofar. For the shofar will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruptibility, and this mortal must put on immortality. But when this corruptible will be put on will have put on incorruptibility, and this mortal will have put on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that it is written, death is swallowed up in victory. Now, this whole transformation here fulfills a prophecy in Isaiah 25:8, and Paul is just bringing that up. He's harmonizing that with basically saying that God is will overcome, Yeshua will overcome death. And this whole idea that here's where he's talking about, will be changed in the twinkling of an eye. It's not going to be a gradual change from corruptible to incorruptible. No, it's going to be instantaneous, that our bodies as they were, and how that coalesces, how the body comes back together, and then there is a body to resurrect. I don't know. God's got it under control, but he says that there will be a resurrection of the body. And so something there, he's gonna bring them back, and we will have that change from the decayed, diseased, broken, dead corpse, as it were, into a heavenly, basically a heavenly being, one that is incorruptible, one that's going to live forever, one that is not going to be sick, one that's not going to be broken. And so it's a completely different thing. It's going to happen immediately. Now it says, for the shofar will sound and the dead will be raised incorruptible and will be changed. So when they come up out of the ground, when the dead come up, or out of the ground or out of the sea, or wherever it is that they died or their body was entombed, then by necessity they would have to be changed into an immortal, an incorruptible being. And we could also get into talking about the shofar. What's he talking about? The last shofar will sound. Now, depending on your point of view of what the Christian church calls the rapture, some will say that the last shofar sounding will be the time when that it won't be the last shofar. It just says the shofar will sound. Well, that's for them a pre-tribulation rapture. Okay, those of you that know me know I do not teach a pre-tribulation rapture because I believe that it was kind of invented in around 1830 by some a girl had a vision or something, and then Darby and Schofield and others picked up on this and have promoted this idea of a pre-tribulation rapture because it's very attractive. The whole idea that, okay, I don't have to worry about the tribulation period and all of that kind of stuff, because God's going to take all the saints out and leave the world to all the sinners and Jews. And there's just going to be a big conflagration, and millions and millions of people will die. And I've had pastors tell me that I don't even read Revelation. I don't really know that much about it. I don't read it because I'm going to be gone, and so I don't really care what happens after that. I mean, and these were, guys that I kind of sort of respected their opinion. And when we got to talking about that, I was very disappointed in that point of view that they could take one part of the Bible, and that to me is very important, and just disregard it because they feel like that there's going to be this rapture and all of the believers will be taken out for that 7-year period. And it's beyond the scope of this class tonight to refute that. But I think we can, I'm just going to go ahead and say that I do believe that the believers will be going through most, if not all, of the tribulation period, but that God will protect his own to a certain extent. We will not suffer exactly and as strongly as the non-believers will, because God is certainly able to direct those 100-pound hailstones to where it won't hit you, and the scorpions that come in and where people are begging to die. Well, I think God can put a seal on us, and that just says, hailstones, no, these are my people. They're off limits. Scorpions, these are my people. You cannot sting them. So, the children of Israel went through the plagues in Egypt. God didn't remove them from Egypt. No, they were there in Egypt, and they were not affected as much by the plagues. Now, were they affected? Were they not affected at all? No, I don't think so. I think that there were some things that that they would have been affected by, but for the most part, they were not killed. And certainly the final plague, as long as they did what God told them to do and put the blood on the doorpost, then they were spared the slaughter of that night. And so Again, people will talk about, so God spared Noah. And I said, well, yes and no. I mean, Noah still had to go through the flood. God didn't pick up Noah and his family and bring them to heaven while he, pressure washed the earth and then put him back down to start all over again. No, he went through the flood. He sat in that boat for a year. And so I believe that, we're probably going to see that. The Bible talks about a great falling away, and that could be part of it, where when people have been taught all their lives that God is going to take them out of this turmoil, and then all of a sudden they found out that that was not accurate, there's going to be a falling away, I believe. So anyway, that's I got out on a rabbi trail there, and we'll have to address that some other day. But let's just suffice it to say that when that shofar sounds, whenever that happens to be, then that is the key. That's when God says, okay, we're going to change the corruptible into incorruptible and bring our people home at that point. Okay. So I think I covered all of that. And we have to change into that incorruptible body if we're going to then live in a heavenly realm as such. All right, going ahead. Verse 55, unless there are any comments or questions. I'm just assuming you don't have okay. Carl.
I just wanted to ask you, when it says last trumpet, that's a name for Feast of Trumpets, right? The last shofar.
I believe, I believe it is. That's when that's when I would think that things are going to finally come to a close, is when they blow that last trumpet. That will be at the Feast of Trumpets, or the festival of blowing, as it is, Yom Teruah. Day of blowing, and I believe that it will be around there. We don't know maybe what the exact day or the hour, of course, but it would certainly make sense that ushers in the second coming of Yeshua, because we know that the fall feasts are talking about his second coming, whereas the spring feasts were all concerned with his first coming. So yeah, it could very well be Rosh Hashanah. And I know that for my own self, every day, every year that comes around, I kind of look at Rosh Hashanah and know that, okay, this could be that day sometime in the future, because I also believe that we have to have a temple built first, and certain things, certain other markers before all this could take place. But yes, in terms of when in the Hebrew calendar, I think that last trumpet will be during Rosh Hashanah. Yes, sir. So Paul says, where, O death, is your victory? I got so far behind. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? Now the sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the Torah. But thanks be to God, who keeps giving us the victory through our Lord Yeshua, the Messiah. Okay, Paul kind of modified a little bit Hosea's defiant challenge for death, and that comes from Hosea 13:14, and I think I quoted it here. Yeah. Should I redeem them from plague, from death? O death, where are your plagues? O Sheol, where is your sting? And so death is still the enemy. Okay, the Jewish people would still, and all of us, I mean, people in general, we're going to still say that, yeah, death is not my friend, for generally speaking. And so here he is saying that, okay, death, where's your sting? Okay, it's kind of like an opponent when we get out on the sports field and or a boxer, they're boxing, and one guy gets in a good punch, and then the other guy just backs off, and he says, "Oh yeah, is that all you got? Come on, is that the best you can do?" That's what Paul is saying here about death. Is that all you got? Is that the best you can do? It is our enemy. Death is still the enemy. Another thing that he says there is that the power of sin is the Torah. Now, what does he mean by that? Anybody got an idea what he means by that? I'm going to open it up. Please give me a comment or two. What does he mean by that? The power of sin is the Torah. It's what I mean. We've all along known that the law is God's standard of holiness. How else would we know what is right and what is wrong unless God tells us what is right and wrong? So that is, yeah, the Torah, when it says that's the power of sin, that tells us what he's saying there is that without Torah, we wouldn't really know what is sin. So people that talk about, that want to badmouth the Torah and say, yeah, see, here it is. That's where sin gets its powers from the Torah. So if you follow Torah, then you're just making sin worse, and so, which is totally ridiculous. They don't know what they're talking about. The Torah is what defines sin. It's God's standard. He puts that up on the board. That's the rules, and so that's where we know what we're supposed to do, what we're not supposed to do. And so, but Paul goes on then, and he says, but thanks be to God who keeps giving us the victory through our Lord Yeshua. So he brings them all through that idea of the resurrection and how there has to be a resurrection. If there is not a resurrection, then what are we here for? What's the purpose of our existence if there is no resurrection? And yes, there is a resurrection. The idea of a body going into the ground and then it rots away. And so how are you going to resurrect that? Well, that's because God is going to change those molecules and cells and so forth and bring them all back together again, just like he brought you together the very first time, just like he created Adam. Because now, think about it this way. When God created the heavens and earth and all of that, how did he do it? He spoke it into existence. But not for mankind. He did not speak mankind into existence. He took something that he had already created. All those other things, he created them out of whole cloth, out of nothing. But for mankind, he took dirt, mixed it together, formed it into a man, and then breathed life into that man. So we're different than all other creation, okay? And so that sets us apart from the animals, because the animals were just created, but God constructed us. He made something, he made us out of something that he had already created, and that was the dirt, the dust. And so we can know then that we're special to God. Of course we are. He sent a Savior for us to bring us into right standing with him. So that's what Paul was so thankful for. He said, therefore, my dearly loved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. So Paul ends this in a pep rally, in a way. I mean, he ends it up on a high note. He talks to them about, okay, all of these things, I mean, he had really nailed them for 15 chapters here, but now he's ending it up and saying, but we are going to be resurrected into heavenly bodies through the power of Yeshua. We're going to be spiritual bodies, and you think you're spiritual now, you ain't seen nothing yet. Is what he's talking to these guys about, and he tells them, let's be steadfast. Like I end most of my sermons, I said, be strong, keep strong, stay strong. He's telling them, be steadfast, immovable, and always excelling in the work. And I like those words, steadfast. There's other scriptures that talk about, now having done all to stand, then stand. Don't run, don't sit down. Have you done everything that you can stand in God's word? Then stand there ready for the fight. And this is always excelling in the word of the Lord. Do we do that? Do we work such that we let people know, you know what, I'm a child of God, and because I'm a child of God, I'm doing everything to the very best of my ability. It hurts me when I was in the workplace and in the Coast Guard and then the oil field, when I'd see some professing Christian or, you know, Christian, that they would talk about how they love the Lord, and yet their work product, let's just say it could stand some improvement. Okay. And you know, you've heard the deal where somebody's so earthly or so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. Well, if you're a believer in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the Son of God, Yeshua, then I expect your work product to be as right there on the top, as you know, you could be compared to anybody. You work to the best of your ability. Okay. Now, I grant you, if my job was to be a forward on an NBA team, I could work to the best of my ability and I wouldn't be very good compared to the other guys. But as long as I work to the best of my ability, that's what God expects us to do. And, you know, I might draw a foul once in a while and get to make a free throw. But if that's the best I can do, then that's what God expects. He does not expect me to, you know, dunk a basketball into a hoop that's 10 feet tall, because my little 5'7" frame won't get 6 inches off the ground, period. And so, but God expects us to do the very best, because everything that we do for the Lord, no matter what it is, it's not in vain. He will reward us for it. He sees everything that we do, and everything that we do for him, it's counted. It's those crowns, you know, the jewels in your crown, and it can be anything really. I see, you know, people in our congregation that are helping out, putting things away and setting things up. That helps. They help Pat in the kitchen in there. We got other people who are teaching, and other times when, okay, there's a spill or something, somebody will jump up and grab some paper towels and they'll help clean up. All of that kind of stuff that just goes in, that is working for the Lord. And those people that in our congregation that go and visit prisoners in the state prison system, okay, that is something that God has called them to do. They're doing that to the very best of their ability. And, you know, they may think or seem sometimes that, why am I doing this? Because nobody's coming to the Lord, or these people are just, they don't appreciate me or whatever. But Paul says that your labor is not in vain. It's always going to, it's going to be good. And, you know, in the end, you know, I've read the end of the book. We win, folks. We win.